Hey everyone, welcome back to the MN Viking Zombie YouTube channel and Twitch channel. My name is Kyle Smith. I am very happy to be tagging along with the content creator here and the channel owner, Mr. Adam Carlson.
Yeah, I'm here, and we decided to check out Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 2022 Netflix film, which takes a beloved franchise and with it, and I'm sure we'll talk plenty about that. Sorry we ran a little bit late today. We were having a few technical issues, but we got them mostly hammered out. If you are watching right now live on Twitch or YouTube or watching later on YouTube, you'll see that I still didn't quite get my visual thing figured out here. My green screen stuff is not functioning the way I wanted it to, but the show must go on, right?
Yeah, we'll overcome. We always do. This is
So I will be one of the first to admit that I have probably only seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films once, and they were all quite a while ago. So I didn't have the franchise really fresh in my memory when I watched this movie.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've done that, and it's not because I don't like those. It's not one of those in a negative sense. Like we said, we enjoyed those movies, being especially if you're a Gore fan, but just didn't feel the need to revisit. It's a pretty simple plot. This one's a little more complicated, which I like, but I guess we could dive right into this. Is sort of follows the Halloween theme right now with the new trilogy that's coming out after 40 years later. This is supposedly like a direct sequel.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of franchise reboots recently with entries into, well, maybe not reboots, but revisits anyway, with new entries into Chucky and, Halloween and Scream and all these franchises, horror franchises, getting another look. It's nice to see that renaissance coming through, but sometimes they hit, sometimes they miss, and this is going to be an interesting one to talk about.
Definitely.
Well, the way this started off was interesting too. It was a group of kids that are going out to this town where, of course, the legend of the killings happened. But instead of, like, I don't want to call so many of the characters unlikable, but I just don't know if they were developed enough to really care a lot about, other than the main curly-haired girl.
Correct.
And they were setting out to this town because their goal as social media influencers and I don't want to say woke kids, but they were definitely aware of the surroundings and wanted to change the way that things were being done in the United States and wanted to start their own like little optimal town where there wouldn't be any racism or problems or anything like that. And it's all very idealistic and it's cute. But yeah, I mean, the main theme was strange.
That immediately for me, there's a love-hate here, and I lean more on the hate side because I feel like it's kind of cheap to grab something that is current and popular to help make it more.
And we've talked about this on the show numerous times already. It's a running theme in quite a few films.
Right. And let's be fair and honest here. Adam and we are on the side of progression, and we do love to talk about life topics and social topics, and we agree, we need to have a baseline. There's a lot of change that needs to be made out there, but to me, just being quite honest and frank, I felt like this was kind of a reach, because what I remember was these were just teenagers going on like a summer trip, and they get stranded for something, which is a lot more.
Well, the trip, I believe, was a cover to get those other people out there to see the auctions that were going on for all the buildings.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I misspoke. That I'm thinking about the originals. When I think about the originals is, the circumstance of why they're going, where they're going, and how they ended up here, and which was kind of a setup because it was set in like the 70s. You could get a wrong turn. You'd end up in a wrong town, whatever.
Right.
The one thing that I first didn't like about this to start was this movie is set in sort of an old school Western looking town. It's based in Texas, obviously with the title, but in the originals, there's a super isolated house where there's no one around to help you. And I realize being, in the military, I was stationed out in a place like this. They could have like a little town like you would have in the Western era and days, but I don't know. I really like that isolated one house. I feels a lot scarier than some town that looks kind of like a movie set. This looked a lot like a movie set to me.
Yeah, it was a ghost and the house that they had where the old lady was, that she owned the deed to her house, but they would definitely wanted her to get out of there. And she was housing a secret, and that secret was a very large, very strong man who was able to wreck some shop. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, the whole setup to this movie is strange because you've got the guy at the mechanics, which was open for some reason, this ghost town.
Biggest mystery of this all.
How he stayed in business, I have no idea. Or maybe he just lived off the grid and was super cheap, but he didn't seem progressive, like he'd have solar panels and all that kind of stuff. So I honestly don't understand a lot of what the setup of this movie is. If you don't think about it too much, it's nice. But if you go down the list of horror tropes, this movie hits on just about all of them. You had the final girl. You had the dumb teenagers. You had the overly passionate. You had the hot girl. You had all the stuff that just checked so many lists.
The one guy that we were just talking about, he was going to be the hero, and he does not make it. Spoiler alert. So, yeah, you did. They had a checklist that they went down, which that's one of the things I appreciated. And my biggest takeaway that's a positive, because I don't have too many, but the positive of this movie, man, the kills in this movie were exceptional. I was a big fan.
Another thing that while we're talking about the kills, well, a lot of them were really cool with like snapping someone's bone and stabbing them with it and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of that's super cool, and I wasn't expecting a lot of the kills to be that cool, but a lot of the chainsaw kills were a touch disappointing.
Yes,
but I believe that the mob mentality was gone. Which, I mean, when you've got a large, strong person on a bus with a chainsaw, and you see him carve a couple people up, and everybody's just running towards the back of the bus where they know there's no exit. Yes. I mean, you'd think there would be some people on there that would say, "Okay, we got to take this guy down, no matter what."
Mm-hmm.
And those people did not exist. Maybe it's another cultural statement that people are all talk and no action when it comes to doing things, or maybe it was a political thing where all these people that want society weren't willing to fight for it. I mean, a lot going on in this movie once you kind of scratch past the surface, and it's really interesting to see what's going on.
I don't want to spoil the bus scene too much. Thank you to the YouTube bot that is talking about online strips without.
They are one of our best followers.
We appreciate that. Going in like the chronological order of the movie, I thought for about the first 30 minutes this movie was going to be insanely good, based on the buildup. You have the grumpy guy at the gas station that says, "I know why you're here." The true Texan that's like, "I don't like your liberal kind or your left kind," whatever. You're like, okay, the tension's already started. There's a scene where they drive away in the Tesla and they get pulled over by the local sheriff, and they say, cool, they come to a common ground and they say, "Look, we don't like each other, but don't cause any problems. There won't be any problems," kind of deal. And I like that there was a little bond there between the main character, which her name I have here is Sarah Yarkin. She was Melody, curly-haired, short-haired girl. She said, "Hey, my grandmother's from this town." So that was a tie that I really appreciated. But first 15, 20 minutes, there's no kill. And you're like, okay, getting antsy.
But it set it all up with that gas station visit and the stay away. I mean, like I said, these are horror tropes. If you watch a horror movie, you're expecting to see these kind of things.
Absolutely.
And this movie delivered on so many of them that if you wanted to watch a sort of generic horror movie, this might be perfect for you.
Yeah.
But the question is how it tied in, because it felt like it was a modern reboot, but then the ties to the classic films were there.
Yeah.
Loose, and even if you didn't know those stories, you could watch these movies and get a feel for what was going on. But the harder core fans could watch and get little subtle hints, maybe some dialogue cues and things like that. I think that's kind of an Easter egg for fans, and it makes it more approachable for casual fans. So if you haven't been watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, you can still plug this in and enjoy it.
Absolutely. I think this one's definitely going to appeal to a younger audience. They'll probably think the older ones are grainy and cheesy and all that fun stuff, but this was really fun. building past, I'm not dismissing anything you said, Adam. I don't want to double down on it too long, but I agree with everything you said, and the checklist that they have, it set it up perfectly. The intro to this film is very good. Once we actually see Leatherface and you see how big he is, and he's a towering figure that is kind of unstoppable, even though he's a little slow, a little old now, because this is supposedly tied into the original. When there's killing to start in this movie in the van scene after the old woman passes away, that's when he snaps. And I like that aspect of she had him under control until she didn't.
Right.
I really, really thought the scene where you see him turn into Leatherface and wear her face that he cuts off was tremendous. I think it's probably the best part of the movie. Maybe the ending is for most people, but to see that happen in real time, you're like, oh my goodness. I remember it in prior films with a man, but there's a sentimental value with this mutilation here. And you're like, he's not doing this because he hates her. He wants to be there with her. That's wild. And the poor girl getting in the van. You knew she was going to die. You knew the cops were dead.
I don't get what she rode with that stranger. That part of the story kind of confused me too. I get that she wanted to make sure the lady was all right, but at that point you just ask the cop, hey, give me a call and let me know if she turns out okay. We'll watch after her house. These aren't
residents of that town. They're probably not even residents of that state, and you're just going to hop in with law enforcement figures with potentially a dead body in the back. That was very odd. But it set up the scene perfectly because you knew she was going to die. So but she also was kind of smart in that she was dead, and the driver of the van that was trying to get them to the hospital. It just that whole scene was well done. Absolutely. Aside explaining the woman was in the girl, I should say, I guess, because they were supposed to be like college students, right? Yeah, college age kids, and these are, they're keeping it relevant. They were influenced on social media. They're doing kind of a project, what they were going to do, which we didn't really say too in depth at the beginning, but they're going to take this, what looks like an old Western town, literally an alley of buildings, and they're going to turn it into a safe community, kind of like a safe house for everyone, for all races, genders, colors, all that fun stuff. And you're like, oh, the idea behind that's actually really amazing. But yeah, obviously Leatherface had other plans with that. Once his adoptee mother, I would say, yeah, she said she adopted him. Once
at least now, at first it was kind of curious why this woman is so adamant about not going into an elderly living facility or something like that. And once her secret was revealed, I think everybody was kind of like, oh, this is just asking for stuff to start happening. And she kind of calmed him down to a way that he wasn't this machine full of hate and just wanting to destroy. And honestly, it'd been a while since we've watched a slasher movie that had that unstoppable machine that we just wanted to see tear people apart until he got down to the final girl, of course.
And there's definitely a little Friday the 13th reminiscence there, because the mother here was keeping him in check, or at least hiding him. And then once she was gone, the gloves came off, metaphorically and physically. Like, hey, look, all bets are off now. You guys killed the woman that raised me and kept me protected, has been protecting me now. I don't know how that works if it was the same one from the original film, but there's obviously a strong connection there, which you've got to appreciate. But moving a little bit forward into the story, the guy that's the mechanic, the good-looking conservative guy who's all about his guns and his stuff like that, I don't know. I don't really know what he was doing there. He was saying, hey, as long as you pay me, I'll do whatever. So he's going to renovate everything there, but I don't know how you're going to renovate a whole town in 5 days unless it's just painting.
So it was interesting how everybody hated him because he was that kind of personification of the right wing guy. He had his guns.
Yeah.
He wanted his liberties. He, all that kind of stuff. But the main girl, the final girl of the show, she kind of wanted to learn more about him and
sure,
kind of took a little bit under his wing and wanted to hear about him and learn his side, while the others weren't willing to even talk to him or learn anything about him. And again, this is another political issue in a movie that's about slashing and just smashing, and those kind of details can kind of just pass you right by if you're not really paying attention. You might think that's like a personal thing, but this was so crafted that way to get the responses it wanted to from the people that of course, are going to notice it.
That's the point where I started to really kind of lose interest because I didn't feel like any of that was in the original. And I did feel it was, I don't want to say the word pandering, but kind of catering to an issue now. But I will say that they did depict this very well. A lot of people in these situations, and especially these kind of people, if you're typecasting, we want to paint with a broad brush here. We don't want to assume that about everyone, but in real life, a lot of those people in those situations and those bodies that look like they do, they don't like each other. And I think they nailed that to a T.
Well, the
But I don't.
curly-haired girl, I believe she was a victim in a shooting.
Yes, the younger sister is played by Elsie Fisher, and her name was Lila in the movie, and she was a part of a school shooting, which is the younger sister of the Maynard character, Melody. So there's protection going on there. There's a good storyline between those two because there's a
And
lot
Melody
of
was really doing anything she could to protect her. She didn't want her around anything. She was even
Right.
trying to keep her away from the mechanic, trying to bring her out to this town where nothing could ever hurt her again. She was acting as a protector, but it was so over the top at times that you really didn't like her because you felt like she was trying to hold her sister back in so many ways.
That's very well said. And I think this is just a general Hollywood thing that they do. You know, they typecast 24-year-olds to play 16-year-olds in high school. You get it. You got to have
Right.
people that are attractive and the face of a franchise. They have that face everyone loves and relates to, right? The thing that you brought up just now that I couldn't really get with, and I don't obviously talk about it in every movie, but you know, you can be mature for your age in your early 20s. Obviously, these are kids trying to go and be entrepreneurs and stuff, but I felt like that, you know, kids that age truly aren't worried about that, at least in my generation, maybe yours. You know, we weren't worried about stuff that deep. Not most of us, anyways. So that kind of left me a little bit, like you're saying, like she tried too hard to protect her, and it's like
A lot of the I actually had that issue while I was watching this too, that I didn't think that it was that they weren't aware of or concerned about the issues. I felt like they were, I don't want to say too young to do anything about it, but like the haired girl, if they would have tried to pass her off for a 15-year-old girl, I'd have believed it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird, you know, they do so many things that are accurate in this movie, but like I said, I'm gonna really lean hard into that. It didn't really feel a lot like the original. I know we're setting this in a different time, but it was hard for me to grab onto and actually believe that cause. Like I could believe some teenagers back in the 70s would get lost without a map and technology and end up at a gas station, and then anybody that comes to our gas station that looks like we can send them to old Leatherface, we're going to send them that way. Cool, by happenstance, whatever. But there were so many situations too for them to get out of this situation. Kind of progressing forward along with the movie, the bus scene. They're having a celebration. They've got investors there. They start drinking all day. They're barbecuing. Leatherface is on his way back from the crash that we talked about earlier, and then everyone decides to get in a bus that is so easily accessible and anyone can get into. You or I would not have a problem grabbing a rock, smashing the window or door out, and that's it. And I don't know, you got to feel like those people can't be that naive. I really wanted to see them
Before
try
that scene,
harder
there was
to
some
live.
really cool stuff with Gore. The male character. I think he was the main social influencer.
Yes.
The way that he was attacked was brutal, and some of the wounds that he sustained throughout his fights with Leatherface were amazing.
And you're talking about Dante, the young African American, Jacob
Yes.
Lattimore. Yeah,
Fantastic
he's the key
job.
investor here. I'm sorry I didn't mean to leave you out there, Jacob. That was cool. There's the house that we're talking about in this old Western row. They go in, Dante and Melody, they go in to look, and they're coming to a crossroads. And I thought this was a cool point that they probably could have elaborated a little more on, and they didn't dive into as hard. But our old conservative friend takes the bus keys and he goes, "Where's your deed to this place? I don't even know if you actually own this place. A woman's dead now." And that was pretty crucial because they can't find the deed. They end up not being able to find it. And then that left me like, oh my God, did they find the deed to this house? That was answered about 5 minutes later. Turns out the old woman did own the house.
Yes.
And they were responsible for this death. And then all the gratitude of this decision and the situation weighs down on Melody, the main character. And they kind of go at it a little bit. They don't agree with each other. And then ultimately they're caught in Leatherface's house when he returns, which is a perfect setup. It's another checklist. Get out of
And
that
it
house.
opens up
Don't go
some more
back in that
questions
house.
about that his intentions. Was he
Yes.
there to actually start a town like that? Or was he there for the social media gratification of it to gain
Yes.
followers and get fame? And that question alone pushes this movie in a little bit different of a direction. Well, until Leatherface makes it no longer an issue.
We've talked about this so much on this channel, guys. If you're ever in a horror movie type situation, one, get a firearm and make sure it has a lot of rounds. If you look at Halloween, I'm thinking of the recent Halloween reboot in 2018. If you really want to be sure, get a revolver. They don't jam. You're not going to have as many bullets, but they don't jam. But don't
And
go
the
in
other
the house.
character I really want to talk about in this movie that I thought was kind of interesting was the realtor lady. Her interactions with the group, trying to get all the deeds ready and to get all the auctions going and everything, for her to interact the way she did with the characters and then die trying to escape out the bus window, getting sawed in half. Oh, that was pretty cool.
That was brutal. That whole scene there leading up. Let's talk about some kills in that general part of the movie. It's sort of in the middle. We have our main investor, Dante is the character name. He catches a big cut across his face and laceration to the point his jaw is kind of mangled, which is gnarly. Yeah. Our poor conservative friend gets his face shoved into a broken window glass. And all the while, Melody's underneath the bed, which I thought it was kind of cheesy, but cool at the same time. The homage back to the original weapon. Leatherface has stashed away his chainsaw in the walls of the house. And he I guess he was trying to change a new leaf, or he kept it there for security. But she's hiding under the bed, and he goes and gets out Old Faithful. And that's when the party really starts, because that transitions to this bus scene. If you're looking at Adam right now in his background, that's when the most killings happen. And it was gnarly. It was a bloodbath in that bus.
Which brings us to the point a lot of the fans of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series are really watching this for. The final girl originally comes out. She survived the attack back in the day. She comes out because she hears Leatherface is out. She gets a phone call from one of the police officers, I believe. So she hops in her truck and heads on out there with her gun, and she's ready to do some damage. And you know this setup is going to be fantastic at that point.
Olwen Ferrari, I think. Her Sally, the police officer in there, is the character name, if you remember. You can see and this is no offense to her, she's old, she's haggard, but she's tough. Gosh, she's tough. Yes. She's out here skinning animals, and she looks just like Jamie Lee Curtis. And I don't want to say they ripped him off, but from that,
you can tell she's a survived final girl, because she has had it rough. I mean, she's a tough lady, and that's illustrated when she takes a chainsaw that lifts her off the ground, and she's still alive.
Oh yeah,
but yet the same chainsaw with a gentle, pipe in the air can take people just completely in half. And to me, that was a little bit unrealistic. And
yeah,
I know that we're talking about a movie with a chainsaw killer and everything, but if that's the same chainsaw, it should have cut right through her.
Absolutely.
When he lifted her off the ground.
She was a little person too, compared to how giant Leatherface is.
But she got some good shots at him.
Oh, she did. Yeah. What was crazy is I think she had the opportunity to kill him inside. There was that moment, and she wants to talk to him because she wants to get closure. And it's another checklist off the box, kind of like an action movie, or like, it makes me think of Austin Powers with all the times that Dr. Evil has a chance to kill him and he doesn't.
Right.
But it's like you had the chance right there to blast him out of the water, but she wants that closure. And you could see, like, if you've been waiting 40 or 50 years for this, I mean, you're going to want to say some things, or maybe she doesn't go in a blind rage. Maybe that's the human part of it. But
what did you think of the scene when she was in her truck and the two girls hop in and she doesn't bring them to safety? Instead, she hops out and goes to fight.
Child locks are on. This is a police car.
The girls are just sitting back there.
Yeah, child locks are on, police car, and I was like, that's kind of messed up.
Oh yeah,
because at that point you are trying to protect them temporarily, but this is all for vendetta and revenge for you. You're really saying, I don't care about your life. If I die, I die. But at least now you can figure it, because they can't get away in that situation. They're in the back seat of what looks to be like an old Jeep police car, so they're in there. They're not going anywhere. Which she originally did. Isn't she the one who opened the door eventually and said, okay, do what you need to do?
Right.
Okay.
But it wasn't until after she encountered Leatherface once before she did that. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean,
That was
this, whew. I don't know how I'd react in that situation if
that was stressful.
I'd survived an attack and I wanted revenge that badly. And of course, part of me would want to bring those girls to safety and get them out of town
Sure.
while they had a chance, and then return and take care of business. But also, there's that side of you that's like, I got to do this now if I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, she had gotten that close and driven however far she had driven. She was going to try to get her revenge and, do the vengeance for her friends that had died so many years ago. But and now that we talk about it out loud, I'm saying it again. There's a lot of Halloween in this movie. The same thing
Yes.
happened in the 2018 movie. You have someone trapped in a car with a killer close by, and I'm seeing more and more of it. I'm not saying that this movie ripped that off because they are different in ways, but
It's another horror trope that
it is.
movie that if you watched a lot of horror movies, you're gonna be like, I've seen something like this before.
Scream, the original Scream. It makes me think of that. Shout out to Nev Campbell too, which I met this weekend. Really cool. Got to see her and meet the Scream Queen. I'm really excited about that still. But that moves to me to a weird point we were talking about before. I didn't want to interrupt you. You're mentioning the lifting of Sally. She's about to die or getting killed slowly in this situation. She comes back in a little bit. But the way he just throws her effortlessly made me laugh hard. And he's like superhuman strength, which is awesome. The girls try to get a breakaway and hit him in the vehicle, and they ended up missing. He kind of olays like a bullmaster would, and then they're stuck. And then you see a pivotal moment where Melody says to Lila, "I'm stuck here. I'm going to die. You need to run." And I thought that was very selfless of her. It was very nice. She was going to sacrifice herself for her sister.
She was always looking out for her, though, the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. It was amicable. Little sister comes to fight, though. She says, "I'm not doing it." She's going to find a way. She tries to get the gun, tries to get the rifle, look like an AR-15, and it doesn't. It's the worst feeling you can ever have when you have an enemy in your sight and it goes click instead of boom. And at that point, I'm in there like screaming in the living room. I'm like, run away. Don't stand there. That was a good scene. That was a pivotal scene. Sally has one last hurrah there in that scene before she eventually passes away. Gets a shot off at Leatherface and actually makes him retreat because he's injured.
Yeah.
Sets up to a kind of a weird pre-final scene where there's like a thing of water in some haunted house looking abandoned building.
Yeah.
That was weird, right?
It was a little weird.
I'm not saying it's not possible. I don't know. I don't see how it fit in there. I wanted to know, like, in some movies I've seen before, they're in like a big abandoned school or something like that. You see a big pool back in the day, but obviously it has no water in it. So you can have people camping out in there or doing whatever, but I'm just like, what is this pool of water? How deep is it? And why is it there? There's a little shimmy action too. We thought Lila was going to be gone. She was very close to getting it, but somehow, some way, check that box again. The person who's been through hell fights back, finds a way, and supposedly in that moment we thought she killed Leatherface. Sister comes back. They have a big, massive what we thought was final scene of them working together and killing Leatherface. He falls in the water and it's dramatic. And you're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna make it. And at that point I was checked out. I was like, there's no way these two dainty little women are gonna beat this huge monster. But it's kind of the ending you wanted, right? You kind of thought, if it's gonna be a Hollywood movie, they're gonna find a way.
And you could set up for the sequel. It's these two sisters being
exactly what I thought.
And yes,
you're gonna have survivors, and then they're gonna be the new Sallys, and it's gonna be all great. And then the final scene, which is pretty funny to me, pretty awesome, pretty funny. It was more comedic than more horror, but it was, the terror there is wonderful. Displayed by Lila, Elsie Fisher. So
why?
Melody,
does nobody ever finish people off when they're laying on the ground?
It's in Zombieland, man. You got to double tap. You got to do it. You have to do it, and they never do. And it's another checklist on the box. Don't go in the house that the killer's in. Don't have sex. You're gonna die. And you gotta double tap the killer. You gotta make sure.
Yeah. So as the girls are getting in their vehicle to drive away, what do we see? Leatherface opens those eyes and sits up.
He Undertakers himself back in. And they're going to leave in their Tesla, which I thought was funny. They're trying to make a reference here. and they put in a destination. They look like war-torn veterans at the end of the movie. They've been through hell.
Oh, yes.
Melody's in the passenger seat, Lila's in the driver's seat, and they're like, let's just get the hell out of here and never come back. The window is down. They're going to have the breeze in their face. And what do you see? Should have cued the out-of-tune violins for the wink, ring, ring. Here comes Leatherface to pull Melody out using the chainsaw. Clean swipe, a decapitation to end the movie. There's a sunroof in the Tesla. Poor Lila is watching her sister be beheaded, and he's swinging around and giving homage to the classic, the original. He's dancing and he's got a head in his hand, and he's gonna live. Yeah. And it was pretty epic. It was a little funny.
The driver in that vehicle was the cop that made the call to the woman, right?
I don't know.
Who was driving that vehicle?
On the ending scene?
Yeah.
I think it was just the Tesla they got into, and they used like because you can drive a Tesla like
the self-drive.
Yeah, it's like a satellite driver.
Yeah, because you have to excuse me on that. I'm not big on my vehicles. I don't know.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's really weird. I wouldn't feel comfortable being around in that. I was in a Tesla recently, going to see that Vikings game with the Chargers, and my buddy pulled up with one, and I was like, I hope he doesn't just move his hands and let the car drive us everywhere. That's going to freak me out. But that was a cool thing. That was, a kind of a cool homage to where we are now with technology. She's hanging out of the sunroof, driving away. So it gets smaller and smaller. And she's watching her sister die. And he's just looking at her like, I'm still here. And I won. I won this round. You might have gotten away. And this does absolutely set up for another one.
Absolutely. This is set up for a franchise now.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't bad. There was a lot of blood, a lot of killing. Could have been better with the town setup. It really did. I'm gonna say it again. It looked like a real movie set, and it didn't look believable.
We've been talking about wanting to do a review of a more I don't know, a more standard kind of typical slasher movie, and that's exactly what. If you want to watch a slasher movie, this will do the trick for you. There are times in this movie that I felt like I was watching a weird adaptation of The Collector. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Yes.
But the fact that it was branded as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I feel like this script could have been for another movie, yet they rewrote it and changed some of the details to be a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film.
I have a reference, or I'm sorry, I have a thing in my head right now, and I'm kind of making this up on the fly, but David Blue Garcia is the director, the writers, Chris Devlin, Fede Alvarez, and Rodo Seguias. I'll watch another movie that you direct, especially in the horror genre. I'm not going to base it off one film. There's been great directors and writers that have stinkers, but to your point, this feels like it could have been something else, and they switched it, and we're like, it's kind of like if you steal a song, you steal a melody, and you just change a little bit of the words and the tempo, and you're like, why does that feel like a Beatles song? It's because
Machine Gun Kellying some misery business.
Oh no, I can't. Don't mess with my Paramore, man. But it also, God, they use so many of the tropes you were talking about. Like,
it was a lot.
Said it to my brother sitting right beside me on his couch at his house. I was like, dude, 4 of these scenes are in that Halloween that just came out so recently. It's tough to like give them a pass because you can't help but feel like they're just like, oh man, it felt kind of rushed and like, oh no. Well, let's just take this because this was successful, because it's a direct sequel. There's the vehicle scene. God, you have the survivor at the end, and then there's main characters that get killed, and you're like, I've seen this before, but I don't want to totally poo-poo on this movie. It was fun. And like you said, for this channel, we haven't watched a true slasher yet. So this was definitely it.
I enjoyed this probably more than I should have.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there was a lot of this that kind of made me scratch my head a little bit at times, and may have taken me not completely out of the movie, but just like maybe a step back.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the way that the final girl interacted with a lot of the characters. I liked how the sister was so protective, even though I didn't like the character. Like, I don't know, she just didn't come off as likable to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
We're
liked
in the
the
same boat
social
here.
media guy. I loved the the bank lady. The whole movie I thought had some good acting from some individuals for a movie where I guess slasher movies aren't known to be
Yeah, there's
movies
not a
that
lot of
have
depth
great
with a lot of
acting.
those characters most of the time. But they, you know what, to your point, a lot of these characters were believable. I believe when I saw the conservative guy, I believed it. When I saw
Yeah,
that guy at the gas station, I was like, of course you're a gas station clerk. And when I see
right.
a bus full of young people of all different ethnicities, because the guys I mentioned before are white males, I'm like, of course, this fits the casting. The casting was very good in this movie. To your point, I
Even
was
when they
not a
pulled to the
fan.
gas station, they were talking to the guy that was gassing up next to them, and that interaction is something that would totally happen today.
Yeah, as much as we don't like that, maybe that subject matter being in horror, they did a good job of depicting it. I'll say it was pretty accurate.
That's one of the things. The horror movies have always been super political, even if they're not that way on the surface. One of
Mhm.
my favorite movies of all time, the original Dawn of the Dead, is one of the most political movies you'll ever see. And if you watch the movie just watching it for horror and gore content, you might not even realize it.
Yep. This
But yeah, if you're watching this on the surface, you got your good slasher movie with some good characters
Mhm.
and some really fun kills. A bit stereotypical as far as horror movies go, but it introduces the franchise to a new generation, and it takes this story and it might shift it a little bit in a different direction, but it's setting it up for future success, which I really like because I want as many cool horror franchises out there as possible. I want so many options, and I love that we're getting so many right now.
Well, you know what this does too, Adam, that helps like a guy like myself, because you and I are pretty close in age, and we have our generations of things that we grew up on. What this is going to do is going to spark the next Scream franchise. Now, you might not even be a fan of Scream. Maybe I'm just using that because it's one of my favorites. But what this is going to do, having this around to respark a new generation, is somebody's going to do an original,
Yeah,
and then they're going to be the next Scream, and they're going to do that, and then we're just going to continue the cycle. We want horror movies to stay alive because they're fun. You know, you might go because you're anticipating being scared and a little bit frightened, and we all sort of like that feeling just a little bit. That's kind of why we set ourselves up for it. But most of the time, when I think of horror movies, I think of fun because I have friends there, and
right.
I'm just anticipating the creativity of what's going to happen, even though I know what's going to happen. You know, we're
Establishing a
paying.
new horror franchise is so hard though these days
It
because
is.
everything is so based off name recognition. I can't imagine if a movie like Saw were to come out today.
Yeah,
I think it might flop
that's a good point. I believe that.
unless word of mouth can spread enough. I mean, nobody pays attention to really reviews anymore.
Yeah.
It would have to almost hit a streaming network, and not hit theaters to gain a following. I mean, it's just interesting how fickle the communities have gotten, and not only the horror community, because it's definitely every community. You have the properties you love, and that's the reason why Marvel does so well. It's the reason why um, anything Star Wars does so well. It's just all these franchises that are out here. They're trying anything to hang on to relevancy just because the name is so familiar.
What's up, Wade? That's a good point. He says the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise has to do with serious issues like crime and punishment. Yeah, those are touchy subjects, man. Those
By the
are.
way, Wade's a good friend of mine. He has a fan of horror. I actually watched some of my. I won't. My first time watching many classic horror franchises came from heading over to his house and watching some of the most awesome films I've ever watched. So, big shout out to Wade. Keep an eye out for his work. He worked with me for a little while. I believe he still works with me over on Undead Walking, doing some reviews for episodes of The Walking Dead. So, yeah, go check out him over there.
That's awesome, man. Shout out to Wade. Thank you so much. I'm going to send something to my computer because I finally have something decent enough to promote, which is fun. But we're
But we
going to
haven't
give our
given our
rating.
grades yet.
Well, yeah, I'm starting to this over now. um, I'll go first, man. I feel like we're probably going to be in agreement again. I'm waiting for the movie where we're complete opposites, but we've been pretty
I
close
actually
on this.
think I enjoyed this more than you did
Oh, I believe it.
because I sat down and even though at the beginning of the movie, again, when they were trying to establish some of the characters and things like that, I glanced down at my phone. But once I picked it up and things started picking up, I was glued to this movie, even though there were the inconsistencies and the things that I felt just weren't quite right about it. I still ended up walking away from it, enjoying the movie, seeing some great kills, and feeling like I didn't waste my time. And I got some. The kills were fantastic. Some of them. The more that I think about some of them, it just makes me smile a little bit more. So I'm gonna give this an 8-2.
Ooh, yeah, well, we're definitely different there, but that is something that we're in agreement upon. I love that, man. I'm glad that you enjoyed it more than I did. I will say this as a preface because we don't dabble too much in this stuff on either one of our podcasts, but we're not going to make anything political because I don't feel like it belongs here. This is the platform for that. Some of you that are right wing that watch this channel or see this later on, you're going to think this movie's too woke and too pandered. Some of the younger generation, you're probably going to connect with it because there's a lot of reference for technology. There's a lot of scene that they got dead accurate with the casting. So it was a little bit cheesy for me at times. The one thing that I did not like that setup of that town. That bothered me so much, and I can't tell you why. But overall, for a slasher and for such a heavy name in the horror industry, because this is one of the cornerstones, this is a big, big franchise. I didn't hate this movie. I would tell people to watch it, but I will go into it and tell you as a preface, if you like the originals or some of the other spinoffs, this is going to go in a different direction than what you've had before. So prepare yourself. Right. Find a character that you latch onto. In this case, I latched onto Lila and I latched onto Leatherface. I am enamored with this Leatherface so much because he could have went in a lot of cool directions. But as far as a rating, I'll give it like a 6.5.
Ouch.
It's kind of tough, man. I don't think it lived up to the original, which most of them don't.
So I don't think I could finish this episode without asking you this question.
Sure.
Did you enjoy this movie more than you enjoyed Halloween Kills?
Halloween Kills, the latest one that's out.
Yes.
I will say this before I give you a direct yes or no. I like Michael Myers better than Leatherface.
Right.
Just because he feels like probably the most iconic horror figure. It isn't Jason or Freddy Krueger. But yes, I did like this movie better than that.
I did too.
I did. I think they dropped the ball with that one really hard. I think they tried really hard with Halloween Kills to follow up a pretty decent direct sequel 40 years later. It was a good one. It wasn't great. But if I had to pick one of the two to watch over, I mean, I'm going to be way more disappointed watching Halloween Kills than I watched this one. So, yeah, I'd pick this movie for sure.
All right. Yeah, we'll be back again soon to talk about another horror movie. There are plenty of them out there on many platforms, and there's been a couple I've checked out that I'm like, I don't think we're going to talk about this one, but we're going to keep an eye out for some new releases, of course. If you have any suggestions as to newer horror films we should check out, both Mr. Smith and I have access to a wide variety of streaming sources and movie sites to where we can watch almost anything that you put at us. So, yeah, if you have something you want us to watch, let us know. Hit us up on Twitter or Instagram or wherever. I'm MN Viking Zombie. He is NC Dog Dude. And thanks again for visiting us and talking about horror movies. Stay bloody, folks.